on the information I sent out at the end of last week. So if you've read that, hopefully this should all make perfect sense to you. If you've not had a chance to have a look at that, hopefully this will reassure you about how we are operating in September. So I'm just going to share my screen so that you can see the slides that I've put together for you that will take us through the arrangements for September. Okay, I'm hoping you can see that. Lovely. Okay, so first of all, before we start anything, I would just say that we are so pleased that our students are coming back fully in September. We didn't know what the arrangements were going to be, whether we were going to be able to have all students back all of the time, but now we know that we are, and we're utterly delighted about it. A school without students is a very strange place to be. We think for students, that good routine, that classroom learning where teachers can very quickly respond if it's clear that a child has misunderstood or in fact is curious and wants to find out a little bit more. That socialisation between students and between teachers and students, all of those things are really good for well-being. So we will be delighted to have children coming out of their bedrooms and stopping learning remotely and coming back into school. And everything I'm going to talk to you about tonight is to ensure that we can manage that in the very best way possible. So here are the things I'm going to go through with you. I'm going to start by talking to you about the control measures that the Department of Education has asked all schools to put in place. So I'm going to tell you about how we're going to manage that. Then we'll talk about travelling to school and arrival at school. We'll talk about groupings for your children when they're in school. We'll talk about the zoning of the school and how break times and lunch times will work. We'll talk a little bit about touch points, because I think just everybody needs to be more conscious about what we're touching and all of those sorts of things. We're going to talk about the end of the school day, and then I'm going to share with you the government guidance on attendance. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about remote learning and when we might need that. I'm going to talk to you about the guidance on school uniform, on behaviour. Lots of questions on Monday night for obvious reasons, I think, about face covering, so I'm going to talk to you about that. And then I'm going to talk to you about sort of the restart of the curriculum and really getting back to normal and getting on with our learning and picking up from where we've left off. So first of all then, this document is just a screenshot from the government guidance, and the first 4 things on there all schools have to do. So the first one is to ensure that nobody ill comes into school. So a bit later in the presentation, I'll show you the information that I've shared with you before lots of times about not coming to school with coronavirus symptoms. That's also being shared with staff and anybody that would come onto the school site. The second one is all about hand sanitisation. And right from before school closed, we were encouraging children to wash hands very regularly. We're going to carry on with the process we've developed for the Year 10 face-to-face provision, and that is asking children to bring a hand sanitizer in with them so they've got their own hand sanitizer, and then teachers will be reminding them very regularly about sanitising their hands. And in the guidance I sent you, you'll note that those hand sanitizers have got to be at least 60% alcohol in order to be effective in deactivating the coronavirus. The third requirement is good respiratory hygiene. So that's the catch it, kill it, bin it. There'll be lots of tissues everywhere, but also we'll be encouraging students all the time via talking to them and via posters about the need to, if they've got a cold, particularly in the autumn and winter, having a tissue with them, catching anything they sneeze or cough into a tissue, getting rid of it, and then washing their hands. And this afternoon I've made a little video of these arrangements for students, and that's really clearly in there as well, those good hygienic processes. And then fourthly is enhanced cleaning, and we've enhanced our cleaning provision so that we've got 2 extra people all day on site, particularly looking at those touch points, those common points where different people will put their hands through the day. Number 5 and number 6 are sort of, it's dependent on how the school wants to do it. So number 5 is minimising contact between individuals. So most of this presentation actually will go to explain to you how we're going to group children, how we're going to zone children, how we're going to stagger start, stagger ends in order that we achieve that. All staff have got to stay 2 metres away from your children and from each other, and they know that very clearly. The last one on that particular part of the list is PPE, and in a mainstream secondary school, actually PPE is not necessary. There are a few staff who, according to their own individual risk assessments, will be in PPE, but it will be an unusual thing to see. Our nursing staff will have PPE, particularly because if somebody comes down with symptoms, they will be the people escorting them to the isolation room while we wait for them to be picked up. The bit at the bottom that you can see is about our requirements for track and trace. And we have, throughout this whole period, whenever anybody has had any symptoms or anything, we have contacted Public Health England and followed their advice at every turn. And that's what we need to continue to do going forward. And I'll talk to you a little bit about what the implications might be later on. So firstly, you will have seen this from me in the document that I sent you last week, but also if you're a Year 10 parent, you will have seen this when I was sending you an invite to the Year 10 face-to-face provision. And it just tells you that if your child or anyone in the household is unwell with symptoms of the coronavirus, so a high temperature, a continuous cough, or a loss or adjustment of the sense of taste and sense of smell, then please follow the government advice and get a test. Don't come into school until you know the test is negative. If the test is positive, you then inform school, but you also follow the government guidance on isolation, please. There's a section there that says if your child has a cold, we really are going to be trying to force the catch it, kill it, bin it, so that we're as healthy as possible. And then if your child should develop symptoms during the school day, highly unlikely, but if they do, we'll follow the guidance which says to remove the child and put them in an isolated place. So we've got a room for exactly for this purpose that's well ventilated. We'll keep an adult outside the room with them, so they've got somebody there, and then we'll phone you and ask you to come and bring them in, bring them home rather. Don't want them bringing them in. I have said in my information to you, if you've changed your contact details, can you please make sure that the school has your updated contact details? And can you be mindful, particularly through the autumn term, that we might need to get in touch with you? So can you just sort of be mindful that if school phones, can you make sure that you try and pick up, because it might be that we're asking you to take your child home. If you do pick your child up from us with potential symptoms of coronavirus, we'll then be asking you to follow government guidance and take a test, please. Okay. But let's imagine far more normally, you've got up and you're ready to come to school and everything's fine. We've been asked to advise you to walk or cycle to school. Those are the best methods of getting to school at the moment. If you lift share, you will have seen the guidance I sent out in that big document last week. There's a link in there to RAC guidance about sharing lists, particularly if you're sharing with children in different year groups. And it talks about everybody facing the front, keeping the car well ventilated, cleaning your car quite often, and keeping the people the same as far as possible. The way we group children in school will be shared with the bus companies. So if your child does take a bus, it is highly likely they'll be sat near someone in their same year group, because that's what all of our groupings are based upon. So you can expect that to be the case. And then finally, if you have older children, the sixth form, we've now got their sixth form car parks, so children don't need, or sixth formers don't need to park their cars on Parsonage Barn Lane anymore, which is great because sometimes cars go through there too quickly and can damage the cars that are parked there. They're now in their own car park, nice and safe, tucked away behind the leisure centre. So that's what we'll be asking them to park, and the sixth form team will be talking to them about that later in the summer. So arrival is slightly different. We've got more gates open, more access points open, so that we can disperse people and we've not got so much crowding. So the normal places of entering the school will be open, and that is the student entrance on Parsonage Barn Lane and then the back gate near the infant school. But in addition to that, we're going to open the gate to Carvers, which students will be familiar with from when they've done cross-country, but also the access through the car park near reception. And that's where children that are coming in on the bus probably will want to enter the school. What we haven't done is designated a gate to particular year groups. Instead, we think it's probably safer just to say to you, can you take the gate that's closest to your house? Otherwise, we felt we've got lots of crossing of children on the pavements, and it's easier to manage that as they disperse, as they enter the school campus. We've got a staggered start, and again, that's to limit the number of children trying to come through the gates at once, and also to recognise that we are trying to divide by year group as far as possible. For your children in September, they will have the slightly later arrival time between 22 and 10 to 9, and they really do need to get into school in that 10-minute window, please, so that we can segregate in the way that we're really going to have to in order that we can comply with our own sort of health and safety policies. We'll review that in October half term and see whether we want them to start slightly earlier or whether it's working quite well. But if we can have your help, please, in trying to make sure for health and safety reasons that your children arrive at that time, that would be really, really helpful. Now, during the school day, we're trying to keep things as normal as possible because we think your children have lost out on normal education for quite a period of time, and we want them to get back to their full curriculum in their right grouping so the teaching's absolutely right for them as quickly as possible. So the easiest way to do that, particularly for your children who are now going into Key Stage 4, is to keep the curriculum very, very much the same. And that means that your children will be in a year group bubble. And what that means is it is possible for your child to be in different groups with different members of the same year group throughout the day. This is the only way we can keep the curriculum that your children have chosen, that we can give them the options they've chosen, and that we can teach them to the level that they need to be taught in the setted classes where setting happens. If we had decided to keep bubbles much smaller, so for example, anyone coming in for year 10 provision at the moment will know there are only 15 children in the room because that's what the rules are right now. The new rules are pretty much try and teach children as normal and really do prioritise their educational entitlement to a full curriculum and the right type of setting for them. So that's what we've done. So there will be, just like there always are, different children in your children's class depending on the options they've taken. But at all times, those children will be in the same year group as your child. And that's how the school is zoned as well, which you'll see in just a moment. Now, the whole school site will operate a one-way system. And that's again because our capacity at Ringwood, we use most rooms 100% of the time. So we haven't got great swathes of the school that are sort of sat empty. So we could say, well, we're just going to put this group in this particular room and we don't have to move them at all. We have to move them quite a lot because we have to get access to the specialist areas so that your children can do science, so that your children can do design technology, so that your children can do PE and all of those specialist things. That means that the movement will be quite similar to how it is now. And to facilitate that, the whole school, the entire campus will be on a one-way system, so people aren't crossing each other, and that avoids kind of any face-to-face contact. So we will train your children. I think Mr. Coombs is going to make a video over half term, but we'll also train them when they come back to school in September. On that first morning with their tutor, they'll get to learn the new routes and the way that the school works and just begin to get used to kind of how we need to walk to places now. Now, because they will be entering a room that will have been used before, as they enter, we're going to use the same process of wipe stations that we've got going at the moment for the year 10 provision. And that means as a child comes in, they take a wipe and they wipe down their area before they sit down and start working at their area. That's particularly important if they're using a computer, that they do the keyboard and they do the mouse really, really thoroughly, and they'll be encouraged to do that. They'll then be encouraged to sanitize their hands and then get started. There will be additional cleaning in place throughout the whole day and at break time and lunchtime, particularly going into the classrooms and cleaning. But we're hoping also with having the wipes, with ensuring that nobody with symptoms is coming into school, that we're really trying to minimise the risk everywhere. The best guidance is that classrooms should be set out in rows with everybody facing the front, so they're not face to face, they're facing forward. So over the summer holidays, rooms that are currently arranged in tables for groups, they will be sort of organised so that there are rows and so that students are just all facing the front. Where there are some rooms where tables kind of go around the corner, we will ensure there is a 2-metre distance in any cases like that, but our preference is that all rooms have rows. Break time will be the same as usual. All the school will be out at break time, but they will be in separate zones that I will show you in just a moment, and there will be no food provision at break time because we just can't get that number of children served in a safe way. So please bring something from home for break time. And again, if you have older children, they should be remaining in the sixth form block if they're in the sixth form outside of their normal lessons. The campus will look like this. The sixth form will be in the sixth form block, and the different year groups will be shown which zones they're going to use and they're going to be split down into. And they will use those zones at break time and at lunchtime. Now, lunchtime is a little bit more complicated because we want to do a lunch service and we don't quite know what that looks like yet because we're just still sort of working that through with our caterers. But we want to offer something, and that means we have to have fewer children out at one time. So you will see there that there is some staggering of lunch for each of the different year groups. So for your children, current year 9 going into 10, you will have lunch at a slightly earlier time. That will be at the beginning of period 4, and then you'll go into period 4. And then for year 11, it will be the opposite. You'll have period 4 first, and you'll have lunchtime at the normal time. And again, you'll stick to your zones during those times. I said I'd talk a little bit about touch points. Obviously, we have 1,600 children, so that's a lot of hands, on the school site. So very common places to touch, like door handles, rails on stairs, taps if you go into the toilet, all of those will get extra cleaning. But we are saying to all students, just try and be conscious about what you touch. And I think all of us have had to get used to maybe going to the supermarket and perhaps not shopping in the way that we have before, where we would maybe touch lots of things that were just not really as tactile as perhaps we've been before. And that's really how we want to train all of our students to avoid touching if we can. They will be encouraged to hand sanitize as soon as they get into the lesson. So if they have got anything on their hands, then that will disable that. However, best not to sort of touch in the first place. Students up until now, if they've printed something, they've used a photocopier, but that requires again some touching buttons. So we've bought printers instead, so they can just take the paper off the printer and they don't have to touch anything. We will take the lunch card top-up machine out of action as well, because again, there's one machine and there's lots of things to touch on that. So that one won't be working in the autumn term, and we'll ask you to just top up remotely via parent pay, please. And we've talked about the hand sanitizer, which is the next piece of information on there, just to make sure that we're keeping our hands as clean as possible. At the end of the school day, for sixth formers, they will go in their last lesson of the day and they will continue their study at home. Key Stage 3 will finish at our new end time of 3 o'clock. And Key Stage 4 and 5 will finish at 3:10. So they get 10 minutes longer on their periods 6. And we're really pleased about that, because it just means we can teach them a bit more and we've got them for a little bit longer. The purpose of staggering the end of the day is exactly the same as the purpose of staggering the beginning of the day. That's so we don't have so many people trying to go through the gates at once. And all 4 gates will be in operation at the end of the day, just like they are at the beginning of the day. The bus companies know these timings, so they know that the Key Stage 3 children will just be on the bus for 10 minutes whilst they wait for their Key Stage 4 peers to arrive. We won't be running extracurricular clubs at first. For some younger children, there will be a home learning opportunity to be able to book into the home learning club. And we really want to get our extracurricular up and running as quickly as possible, because we know it's really important to your sons and daughters, and it's a really positive part of school life. So as soon as we can, as soon as guidance lets us, and as soon as we feel that we're able to, we'll start getting those things up and running again. Now here, I'm just sharing with you the government's guidance on attendance, and I put this in the guidance document that I sent you last week, and it just reinforces that the rules that were pre-school closure on the responsibility for the parent to ensure that they are sending their child to school, those will restart in September. Those have been suspended obviously through this period for obvious reasons, but we will work with that government guidance as everything returns to normal. So the expectation is that you're sending your child back, and we're really, really, really looking forward to seeing them. Now, I've just put a note in here about remote working, because I think we just need to be aware that there may be some elements of disruption through the autumn term. Now, if we were to get a positive case, we then have to telephone Public Health England, and they will do something called a rapid risk assessment. And that will tell us who also now needs to isolate, because they've been in quite close contact with the person who has been tested positive for coronavirus. If children are in the position where they are sent home to isolate for 2 weeks, immediately remote learning, like the learning we've just had in the last few weeks, that will kind of kick in. And we'll keep, like we have all the way through this, to trying to keep to the students' timetable so they do the lessons in the right order. If the rest of the school is still back in, their teachers will be doing that, because the teacher will be teaching, say, year 8 will go out, their year 10 class would be due in. If year 10 were off, they then would just click straight into remote learning. It might be possible that the entire school would have to close if there was a sudden spike in the virus in our area of Hampshire or in the New Forest. And in that case, we would just click straight back into the type of learning that we've been doing so far. So Microsoft Teams will really be the main vehicle for that. So just making sure for all students that they don't de-skill themselves over the summer, that they remember how to use it. And the other thing that we're looking at, just to sort of tell you at this stage, is that we're possibly thinking where it might be 1 or 2 students in a class, which it might be in year 10 and 11 because they appear in so many different classes. And we're looking at streaming and whether that's good enough quality for someone to receive the lesson properly at home. So we're looking at that, and that's brand new to us. So we're sort of working through things like that and trying to work out whether that would work and be a good way of your children learning if they had to isolate for 2 weeks. School uniform. Government encourages all schools to return to usual school uniform policies because everybody's back like normal. So that's what we'll do. So if you're currently in year 9 moving to year 10, as we've been saying since January 2018, you're now moving into the grey uniform, please. And if you're in that particular position, hopefully you've received this communication from us this week. This is from Stevenson's, the uniform outfitters, saying you can now book appointments via their website for all year groups. They were just doing year 6 up until this week, but now that's there for everybody. And actually the walk-in service will resume from August the 17th. You'll just be able to go and, as you normally would, a shop and buy something. If you are going into year 11, we recognise that this has been a very difficult time, and we recognise that some families have been really adversely affected financially by the coronavirus. And therefore, if your black uniform still fits, we are content for you to carry on for this final year of school in the black uniform, just to sort of meet you halfway and just to compromise, really. If anybody else in the current year 9 to year 10 year group is in financial need, knowing they've got to get that new uniform, please do get in touch with us. We've absolutely got a plan to help you with that. Now, to limit the amount of changing that goes on PE days, because our changing rooms are very, very small, and we really don't want to cram loads and loads and loads of children in a very small space, we're going to be asking on PE days for you to come in your PE kit. And that will be explained by your PE teacher in the first PE lesson. And that will put in place probably for the whole of the autumn term. We'll just see how guidance changes. But we really want to get rid of the having to change in the changing room, because we just don't think that that's the type of practice that we want right at the moment. Our behaviour policy has had to change and amend, and again, and that's in line with government guidance, because not only do we have our normal behaviour policy, but we do have things in there now for health and safety because of the wider pandemic situation. The one bit I would draw your attention to is the statement that talks about for children who are old enough, and obviously that's all of your children, they should be supported to maintain distance and not touch staff and peers. And we don't have much staff touching, so that's no problem. But children are quite tactile with each other, and particularly there's quite a large group of boys going into year 11 who communicate by grabbing each other, and it's very friendly, but it's very physical. So we do really, really need your help in just enforcing to your children that they just need to be really careful, that they're not touching other people, and they're really trying not to touch things they don't have to touch, putting their hands down rails on the stairs if they don't have to. You're just safer, you just look after yourself better if you're not interacting with those touch points. So we really are emphasising that. And the other thing, just to let you know, that some of our staff are in the clinically vulnerable category, and some are in the extremely clinically vulnerable category. So they're all really looking forward to coming back to work, and they're joining us again in September, because according to the government guidance, they can. But for some of them, because the distancing is really, really critical, they will have hatched areas in their classrooms. They will be hatching on the floor of their classroom to ensure that they remember to stay to the front of the class. But also we will be asking children that are taught by those teachers to not enter that zoning, not enter that hatched area too, so that we can absolutely be certain that we are looking after our teachers and other staff who need that extra bit of protection and security. So again, we would ask just for your support in that. Now, we always hope not to have to run detentions, but should we have to run detentions, just to share with you that the new finish time for detentions will be 4 o'clock, and the new finish time for leadership detention will be 4:30. But it would be fantastic if we didn't have to use that at all. We'll obviously be sharing all of this information with your children when they come back to school in September, and the behaviour policy will be updated again at the end of the holidays, just to take on board any changes that happen in the next 6 or 7 weeks, and that will be shared with you, and that will be posted on the website as well. I'll just give a note about face coverings, because this was a big topic on Monday night when we did the other parent Zoom. I've given you the DfE guidance there, and it says, Public Health England does not, based on current evidence, recommend the use of face coverings in school. This evidence will be kept under review. They're not required in schools as pupils and staff are mixing in consistent groups, and because misuse may inadvertently increase the risk of transmission and also have negative effects on communication and thus education. You cannot talk quite as clearly, can you, if you have your face covered. So there is a feeling of, for communication sense, it's better if we don't have face coverings. Having said that, I'm not going to prevent anybody from wearing a face covering, and there are a few staff in that more vulnerable groups who will be in visors or will be in face coverings. Quite unusual for our staff, but there will be some. And if some students wish to make those decisions, that's fine. If your child is going to wear something though, can I please just say, can you think really carefully about the purpose of them doing that? So the kind of guidance is that it helps protect others in case you're infected with COVID-19 but don't have symptoms. So wearing a face covering is not a protection for you, it is a protection for others. And just to be sure that you do have an increased risk if you're wearing a covering, potentially, because often it leads to touching the face more. And also, it's really important that the mask or the covering is taken off properly. So it should always be taken off from the ear loops and not from the front. Touching the mask at the front should be avoided. It should also be stored in a paper bag or a paper envelope so that moisture is not retained. If it's put in a plastic bag, the moisture just sits there, and that's not good for health either. And that hands are washed before and afterwards. Now, we obviously recognise that that guidance might change, and certainly when I sat and did this Zoom on Monday night, at that point there was lots of discussion about the use of face coverings in shops. It wasn't until after we finished that those then became mandatory from the end of next week. So this is an area where things are moving and shifting. We will always follow government guidance, but we will also always respect the right of the individual. And if you really feel strongly that you would like to be wearing something, that's fine. Please just recognise the risks though as well. Thank you. And then finally, getting ready to restart. Now, there are going to be plenty of tasks for your children to get ready for September. We want your children to have a rest. We recognise that they have worked in really difficult circumstances and have done really, really well, particularly the Year 10s who have got themselves into school for all sorts of sessions over the last few weeks, and they do absolutely deserve their summer holiday and a rest. But we need them to not switch their brains off, because we need them to be absolutely raring to go in September. So for children, particularly in Year 10 group, and if you've got older children for Year 12 as well, there will be some activities for them to do over the summer holidays, and they need to make sure by the end of this week that they're clear about what's expected of them over the next 7 weeks before they come back to school. And those tasks will be very much self-directed, because teachers will be on leave over the next 7 weeks, so they won't be available to help. But we have every confidence in your children and their ability to learn independently, because they have just mastered that so very well. Just a note about what to expect when you come back in terms of lessons. We are going to have to learn very quickly as teachers what your children can remember and can't remember from the things they've learnt during this period, but also the things they understand and the things that they've got completely muddled. And to do that, we're going to be asking for lots and lots of feedback. So there'll be quizzes, there'll be simple assessments, and those will be a very regular part of those early weeks in September, as we just get to work out, what do we need to teach again? What have you mastered? What's fine? What can you remember? To help us do that, a lot of that very quick feedback is very effective on a mini whiteboard. So your children will get a mini whiteboard and a pen and a cloth when they start back in September. Just they've got their very own, we don't have to keep sharing them, and that just helps that feedback that's going to be very important for us. It's also just worth noting that all of those will just be little quizzes. There's no big massive exam the first week they come back or anything like that. But if we have a really disrupted year next year, it may be that we're in the position for current Year 10s going into Year 11, where we're having to do centre assessed grades again. That could potentially happen. So we will have to use every piece of information we've got about your child to be able to make an assessment of how well we think they do. So in that way, we would ask, although these are little quizzes and all of that stuff, that your child does not worry about them, but does try their very best and does sort of try and make themselves proud in every single little assessment. Because if suddenly there is a main closure again, if all schools go into closure and we're having to look at the evidence we've got, we know we don't have the same amount of evidence for current year 10 as we did for last year's year 11. And one's just gone when we had to do the centre assessed grades. So everything is going to be looked at by us. So just try your best. It's what we would always say, but it's particularly important to try your best this year. Now, having said about assessments, I'm just going to hand it over to Mrs. Heber-Webb, who's going to talk to you a little bit about for the current year 10s going into 11 assessments.
Thank you very much. So as Mrs. Simmons says, this is particularly for those of you and your parents who are currently at the end of year 10. And we've actually just had a question about mock exams and when they're going to be on the chat. So hopefully this will give you the information that you need. So as has already been mentioned, in September, there'll be lots of different small assessments from every subject when we come back to find out what the gaps are and what the strengths are of the time that we've been all working in this strange way. And then for year 11, as we move into October, there will be some longer assessments in lessons, just more assessments that allow you to, and your children to demonstrate what they can do over a slightly longer period of time than those short quizzes when they're answering more typical exam questions. And that's partly to remind everybody what those typical exam questions might look like, partly to actually get used to writing under that time pressure again, and partly to help our young people get back in the habit of revision, which is obviously going to be really important across the whole of next year. And then as the term goes on, our mock exam period is scheduled to be the same as every year for year 11. So it starts around about the 5th of December and goes on for a week just before the end of term. And that will be mock exams in all subjects. However, as you can see towards the bottom of the slide, there are also some additional mock exams in the core subjects. So in English, in maths and in science. They are almost the same as we run every year. So we always give our students an extra opportunity throughout the course of year 11 for those really essential core subjects where often there are quite a number of exams as well for one subject. And so they will take place, you can see the weeks there on the slide, the week beginning October the 5th, and then about a month or so later with the week beginning November the 16th in those two different sets of core subjects. And we will, of course, have all the normal opportunities we put in place, like revision evening and consultation evening as well, to help your sons and your daughters prepare for those exams. But they will just be there to help with revision, to give us that extra information, and obviously so that your sons and your daughters really do know what they can do in an exam condition and what yet they need to still work on. Thank you.
Sorry, I muted then. Thank you very much. I will stop my share now and pass over to Mr. Cooper to talk to his year group.
Okay, good evening, everybody. And the first thing, if possible, I could ask you to do, if you are a parent or carer and you're sat with your child, please could you just reach over to them and give them a big pat on the back, because we obviously can't do it to you from this distance, but we are so proud of the way you've risen to all of the challenges that have come up over the past few months. It's been absolutely bonkers, but you've really risen to it, and you've worked really well, and you've done yourselves proud, not just in the classroom, but with all the extracurricular things that you've been doing and learning as well. And we really appreciate that you've shared that with us. Equally, if the students are watching this at the moment with your parents, please can you reach over and give them a pat on the back, because they've effectively been your teachers from home for the past few months as well, and all that chivying along that they've been doing to you, where you might have been incredibly frustrated at them, and they've actually done it for your benefit, and you'll thank them in the long run. So massive thanks all round from me to you guys. I would say the next 6 weeks, have a fantastic time. Really try try and get outside, get away from the screen. I feel that even when I close my eyes at the moment, I feel I'm looking at a computer screen. So do get away, get outside, try and see people as well where it's safe. And if you're worried about your education, then just go outside, take a book with you, because you can never read too much, and that will have a positive knock-on effect for everything. But a huge well done, massive pat on the back, and genuinely cannot wait to see you when you come back in September. If you could do me one favour before you sign off on Friday at midday, if you could take a moment just to thank your tutor for being there for you, and for the fact that they've been available to talk and you have been able to contact them at any point. I know that they would really appreciate that, and that would set them off on their summer holidays as well in a really positive and good mood. But huge thumbs up for me. Can't wait to see you again in September.
Thanks, Tom, and a huge thanks to you as well for rallying your tutor team to be so supportive of our young people. So it's much appreciated, and I know the students would have appreciated it as well. So thank you to you. And we're going to pass over to Christian, Mrs. Shepherd.
Hi, yeah, I just really wanted to kind of echo what Mr. Cooper said. He's said it very well, I have to say. But yeah, a massive thank you to all the students who are tuned in. I've been so proud of the way that you guys have just taken everything in your stride and really taken it on board and gone for it. I've had some conversations with lots of you over the phone over the past few weeks and months, and they've been absolutely lovely. And I've really enjoyed kind of building those relationships with you guys as well. And again, a massive thank you to all of you parents for the efforts that you've put in to kind of support the students from home. I think one of the biggest kind of positives that have come out of this are actually the positive relationships that have been made between the staff, the students, and yourself as parents over this time. I think we've really built up some lovely relationships there, and hopefully that will continue as we move through year 11 as well. But yeah, I again with Mr. Cooper, I know exactly what he means about looking at a screen too much, and I feel like everyone's in the same boat at the moment. And we just need to take some time to rest, relax, and just switch off completely. And obviously, next year is a particularly big one for year 10 going into year 11. So I'd like to see everyone back, with a fresh face and ready and raring to go for a really important year. And as Mr. Cooper said, I really cannot wait to see you guys again. It's been far too long, and I'm really looking forward to seeing your faces. So thank you very much, and have a lovely summer.
And Christian, thank you very much as well. The same to you. You have rallied your tutor team to really be supportive of our year 10. So it's much appreciated, your time and effort, and also the time for both yourself and Tom coming and staying this evening for the Zoom. So thank you. Leanne, I just wonder if you'd like to come back in and answer any of the questions that have come up through the chat that we might have missed.
Well, I thought they looked like they'd all been answered, to be honest. I did note that the performing arts there was a question about performing arts, I think, in the PE kit. Yeah. And so, yes, performing arts will be in PE kit in the same way that you will for PE. I think they happen at the same time as PE anyway, so that should be nice and convenient for you.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And just perhaps to also note that the year 10 and 11 students will finish at 3:10.
Yeah, did I not say that when I went through?
I think it was there, but just to stress that will obviously benefit that final period of the day.
Absolutely, so that's a 1 hour lesson at the end of the day, which we're really pleased about. I hope your children will be too.
Yeah.
Mrs. Warnell, did you want to say something?
Yeah, there's just been a couple of queries about catch-up and supporting students through catch-up, so I thought it might be useful to answer that question and what we're doing as a school, because we know that we're, like you said, we're assessing, aren't we, to begin with, just quick checks, but we're not running a catch-up programme immediately.
No, not whatever. What we want to do is establish kind of where your children are at, and if we need catch-up, then we'll move into that. Normally the spring term is where lots of revision after school sessions start. So that would be our anticipation, unless guidance prevents us from doing that. But I know lots of teachers will want to be doing that, and they will be ensuring that they're giving your children lots of home learning, lots of pre-learning, so they're ready for the next lesson. And the work over the summer as well is really important. Incidentally, if you feel that for whatever reason, maybe you had a technology blip for 3 or 4 weeks in the middle of it all, or whatever, if you feel, or your children feel, that they want to go back over anything, they can access all the work that's been set for them, all of those resources, all of those PowerPoints, everything that their teachers have done. All of that stays live in their teams according to their classes, so just going into those boxes on their classes that they have been doing all the way along until the 3rd of September, which is when we roll the timetable forward. So for the whole of the summer holidays, if they want to go and revisit anything, that's absolutely there for them. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, Lou, for fielding those from the chat as well. And just before we finish tonight, we've got a bonus session for you, which our lovely Elsa, Mrs. Lakin, Jo Lakin, is going to run. Just a few moments of her knowledge and time with regards to managing anxiety in adolescents. It was a really well-received session on our 7 and 8 Zoom earlier in this week. So I'm going to hand over to Jo, and she's just going to go through a short input for us on how we can support our young people with their anxiety about potentially come back to school, but also everything that's happened to date. So, Jo.
Unmute myself first, sorry. Hi, my name's Jo Lakin. I'm the Emotional Support Lead and Elsa at Ringwood School. And I, just wanted to have a little bit of an opportunity to talk about anxiety, because I know that students are going to feel a little bit anxious about coming back, especially with new routines and everything that we've just talked through. Teachers actually are going to feel a little bit anxious about coming back. And I think parents, you're probably going to feel a little bit anxious about sending your students back in too. So I just wanted to take a moment to just explain a little bit about anxiety before I'll give you a few little hints and tips on how we might deal with it at home. So firstly, anxiety is not only an emotional feeling of worry, fear and panic, but it's also physical sensations such as a racing heart, fast breathing, sweaty hands, dry mouth, nausea, and feeling shaky. And the reason that happens is it always goes back to our prehistoric brain. So when we were cavemen, and when that saber-toothed tiger suddenly appeared, we were going to decide whether we were going to fight this tiger or whether we were going to run away from it. So what happens is our brain, which controls the respiratory system, the circulatory system, the digestive system, the brain says, oh, there's a danger and we've got to deal with it. So the brain will actually affect the breathing, because it will the adrenaline will give a huge rush of oxygen to make sure that we can get away as fast as we can. It will pump more blood to our hearts. Now this means that less blood is going to our heads, which is why we might feel that kind of fuzzy feeling in our heads. We might get pins and needles in our fingers and toes. It also cuts off our digestive system, because no one ever stopped to need a sandwich while they're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. So what happens is the digestive system shuts down, and that's when we get those feelings of nausea, butterflies, that sort of thing. And also our muscles become really tight, because that surge of adrenaline is going to those big muscles in order to help us to decide whether we're going to fight or run away. Now, when those muscles become quite tight, they can squeeze, and for example, they'll squeeze in your stomach, which will press on your bladder, which kind of makes you want to go to the toilet. Also, feeling sweaty, our bodies are going to be quite hot. So our body is going to make us quite sweaty to keep us cool. So I think it's really important to understand some of those physical sensations that happen. So when your young person in your house comes down the stairs and says, oh, I feel a little bit sick today, at least you can understand that actually it's their body's working really, really well, and we can help to perhaps get them to understand why those sort of physical sensations are happening. So also there are times when our brains can react in an unhelpful way. So thinking about that danger, when that danger goes off and that whole prehistoric brain thing, imagine your smoke alarm in your house. Now your smoke alarm in your house will go off whether you've burnt the toast or whether your house is on fire. It doesn't make a different noise for a different danger. And our brains can be very much like that. So we need to help our brains to control that thinking and to help us to understand, is this really a huge problem, or is this something that I can use a good coping strategy to help myself think through that a little bit more helpfully? So one of the things we need to work about is how we can respond in a positive way that will reinforce our behaviour for future similar scenarios. Let me give you an example. It's all about balance. So if we've got a good balance, we will estimate that something bad might happen, and we will estimate our ability to cope. However, if our anxiety is quite high, we will overestimate that something bad will happen and underestimate our ability to cope, which then puts us into a bit of an unhelpful thinking cycle. Now, when we work with the young people in school, we use very much the cognitive behaviour therapy hot cross bun method, and that helps our young people to understand that their thoughts can control their behaviour and can control their feelings, and also their body signals and how they kind of come across to other people. Let me give you an example. So if we've got a young person who says, well, I'm not going to put my hand up in class, and they think, I'm never going to put my hand up in class because my thought is everyone will laugh at me, I'll get the answer wrong, and I'll never be able to get that answer right. Now that thought makes them feel very anxious, makes them feel very nervous, makes them feel quite scared maybe. Their behaviour from that will make them come across as quite offish, maybe quite withdrawn. They might avoid eye contact. And then their body signals, obviously coming off of that as well, will be the avoiding eye contact, will be sitting differently. And, you know, just from that one thought, it can absolutely change how that young person comes across in class. Now, if we challenge that thought and say, okay, really, every time you put your hand up, you're going to get the answer wrong. Let's just have a look at that. Is that true? Then they start to realize that actually that's not always correct. Let me explain that a little bit more. It's about breaking the cycle. When we get into a cycle of thinking that something's going to go wrong, and then it becomes quite hard to undo that cycle. So I'll give you another example. If our young people think, I don't have any friends, therefore they will avoid going into school, then they will miss out on their social times in school, which means that their friends might move on and speak to other people. Then they will feel that they don't belong. Then they will avoid going to school because they feel like they don't have any friends. So can you see that that thinking can get you into quite a cycle? And it's really important when we are challenging these thoughts that we think about how we can break that cycle but not feed it. So our brains are always going to look for ways to say, yay, I got away with that, I avoided it, how am I going to do it again? When actually we need to support their brains to say, yay, I did it and I can do it again. So how do we do that? How can we help that? Well, as a parent and obviously as supporting staff in school and teaching staff, the best thing we can do is to listen. And we need to listen in a way that is inquisitive, be curious, ask questions, and really listen. Don't interrogate. Don't try and think that you know the answers just because, or you know how they're feeling just because they've kind of been through something like that before. You might have been through something like that before. Really take the time to listen and be careful not to put your feelings onto them. Check that you understand, maybe repeat it back and say, am I right in thinking that this is how you're feeling right now? And then give them the opportunity, work alongside them. This is something we do a lot in school, is to give them the opportunity to solve the problem themselves, or with our help, of course. And then once we've got into that, once we've started to solve those problems, we've then got evidence to say, I know you're feeling really anxious, but you did it really well yesterday. Let's try and see if we can do it as well today. It's all about building those little steps, really, and just, you know, you can't eat an elephant all in one sitting, isn't that the phrase? So it's just building little small steps. And then when they've started to build those small steps, then they realise that they're starting to build their coping strategies. We've talked there are a few coping strategies. I think we've mentioned some of the Mrs. Blake in Lends a Hand videos. Again, I'm very happy to share anything. I think we might share my email address on the chat. So I'm very happy if there's anything that I can pass on to you, very happy to do that. We've also talked about doing some parenting sessions, I believe. So if you're interested in that, please do send me an email, and we're looking to perhaps start those in September. But what I wanted to finish with saying is, as a pastoral team, we've spent lockdown upskilling ourselves. We don't know what September's going to look like, but we really care and we really want to support your young people, and we're going to learn and we're going to try our best. So to sum up, it's about the balance with overestimating and underestimating how we're going to cope with these issues. It's about learning to break that cycle, and it's about listening, resisting the urge to just fix it, asking questions, really check that you understand what's going on for your child, and don't transfer your fears. I hope that's been helpful. Thank you.
Jo, thank you so much for giving up your time and your support to some of our young people I know who are probably in the call tonight as well, who will be pleased to see your face. And I've just popped your jo.lakin@ringwood.hants.sch.uk email address into the chat, so that if parents are interested in perhaps joining you for a small parenting session via Zoom over the summer, just to build on some of those techniques and some of that amazing reading you've had the opportunity to do over this period of lockdown, then they only need to email you to make themselves known, so that they can have that chance to take it up. So thank you in advance of running that for us and for our parents and students. Thanks, Jo. So that just remains really now for us to say thank you very much for your time. Thank you to colleagues who have given up their evening to give the information today. We do really appreciate all of your kindness in the chat. It's been a big job to get to this point. Leanne has been reading and assimilating information like it's going out of fashion, often changing every 5-10 minutes. So we really appreciate having that clarity, and I'm sure you do as well. Your comments have suggested so. As we head into the summer holidays on Friday, it's not always the greatest time for some families, although as teachers it's a happy time for us. Then we are also mindful of our families who perhaps struggle a little bit more without the structure of school. So please, if you know families who might need extra help, do use the safeguarding@ringwood.hants.sch.uk email address. We will be manning that all over the holidays. There's information on our safeguarding pages as well as our wellbeing pages. So do go there to have a look and signpost other families, or indeed yourself, if you need some information and support over the period that we're closed. 7 weeks it will be for our Key Stage 4 students. So thank you again. We are a community school looking out for each other. So free school meal vouchers, if you've got any problems with those and you know that you're entitled, then please do let us know before we close at 12:55 on Friday, and we'll be able to help you with that as well if necessary. But thank you for your time, taking up an hour of your evening. We wish you a very happy rest of your day and week, and we look forward to being in contact with you as we come towards September and hopefully know more about what our reopening will look like. So thank you and have a good rest of your evening.